Wait.
Something
Live streaming is on.
We're live. I think we're live. It
Hooray!
just took us 9 minutes. Normally, the fucking YouTube can take us for a longer time.
Well, I'm like
everybody,
coming
let me
on
check
my,
if YouTube is live so you see if my cursing is being heard, which I don't care. This is a curse area, not for kids, whatever. Carolina says we will have to go to YouTube to break some legs. Yes, you do it. I will support it. Anyway, we're live. Thank you, everybody. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good whatever. If you're watching this live or non-live, as you know, I call that the zombie mode. Today's T-shirt is, of course, dedicated to our guest. With us is let's first. Sorry, Jill. My public service announcement of the day is going to be soft and is not going to use house language. Oh, yes. You know what? House language. Wear your fucking mask. Don't be an asshole. No, not you. Not you, Jill. We're fine.
I'm happy to be able to wear makeup, to wear some lipstick right now, because usually when I'm wearing my mask out, the first few times I wore it, I just totally forgot, and I put lipstick on like I would regularly do to go out because I like to look my best. And I came back, took it off, and I looked like the Joker. It was awful. I was like, okay.
This is not for you. This is just for all you out there. Wear your mask. If you want to kill yourself, that's your problem, idiot. But you know what? This is not about you. It's about other people. You can kill other people, and that I care about. So if you're an asshole and you don't want to wear your mask, leave this channel now. I don't want you here.
There's a new term for that. It's called mask hole.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard it. So
okay, good to know. Anyway, after this public service announcement in the most polite words, which is my usual thing, with us is the magnificent, amazing, lovely one person I miss like you can't imagine. My dear friend, yes. My dear friend Jill Thompson. How are you, Jill?
I'm doing the best that I can in a pandemic and a dystopian future that I didn't plan on be living in. But I'm adapting. How about you?
Nah, fine. We are not.
I would like to hug some people.
No, same thing. It's just weird not to see you now and just not, hug you like a bear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's and plus it's Friday of Comic-Con.
Yes.
We're not at Comic-Con, so.
Yeah, we would both be there.
Which means I'm also surprisingly not tired, and I actually got enough sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So by Friday, you're always thinking, "Oh my God, thank God this is almost. Oh, it's only Friday," because you've been there from Tuesday to set up, and then have preview night for Wednesday, and you're constantly rushing around. Doesn't matter how prepared you think you are or what you've sent ahead of you. There's always something that goes missing, is lost by the airline, is broken. You can't get it from one place to another. There's so many people, and it seems like even if I would get there a whole day before and set everything up, 15 minutes into the show, I'm still putting things up saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, it'll be just one more minute. I just have to get this out." And I was like, I apologize. And people must think I would show up at the very last minute. But I was like, no, I've been doing this for 15 hours straight already, and I still can't get it together.
Do you remember last year when British Airways lost all my stuff?
Yes.
And it was crazy, and having to call them every day. He didn't show up for 10 days. Had to, cancel a lot of interviews, buy a lot of clothes, whatever I could find on the what's the name of the mall
It's closed. They closed that mall.
They closed it, yeah. But that was I have to go to the Westfield almost every day to buy stuff. So this year I could be even more fucked because the Westfield is not there anymore. So
I'm curious. I always wonder how much money Comic-Con brings in to that region, to San Diego, not just the hotels, but to all the businesses. And I'm always especially interested in how much the grocery store that everybody goes to
yes.
makes just in that week. I really want to know. It has to just spike exponentially. So I'm curious if someone will be publishing figures just based on the fact that Comic-Con isn't there at all this year.
Yes.
And they might be more apt to disclose that type of thing. So
Yeah, it's the second year. Is as far as I know, based on the numbers, it's the second biggest convention in San Diego every year. There's a bigger one that is a dentist convention.
interesting. You think it couldn't get any bigger, but I mean, I'm glad that there are that many dentists because everyone needs to take care of their teeth. And I've seen a lot of people that look like they haven't seen a dentist, so maybe we even need more dentists.
Yeah, and you know what? Probably considering how much a dentist earns a year, they probably spend a lot of money when they're in town.
I guess if you think about it, I've heard, like when doctors and drug company representatives go out, it's always steaks and strippers and all that kind of a thing, whiskey and whatnot. Maybe dentists are even like more crazy, right? I feel like if you think about about doctors in general, you think, okay, surgeons, brain surgeons, there's like a hierarchy of how you think about doctors, and that plastic surgeons, they're probably crazy guys because their whole thing is about how people look and whatever. Heart surgeons probably a bit more reserved, but dentists, you probably think they're very meek, except that one dentist from Little Shop of Horrors.
That's I love you. When you just started talking about the dentist being crazy here, Steve Martin just popped in my head, attacking Rick Moranis and all that.
maybe that dentist is not he's not the exception, he's the rule. And San Diego like battens down the hat. They're like, oh yay, Comic-Con, come on, everybody come in, we'll put our little t-shirts on, please buy our stuff. But when the dentists come, it's like, we love their money, but they're terrifying individuals. Like, lock up everything.
Imagine our gatherings, the Hyatt or the Marriott Pool or the Hard Rock Cafe, and instead of us, the comics people, dentists saying, I'm offering you, free free dentals, and you're in the pub and you have a dentist like, well, you try to have your Mai Tai or something like that.
What about, and there's like big furry teeth walking around, like teeth but furry version of it. So
okay, we're mad.
Okay.
Just you people. What is the thing that you miss the most, aside of Comic-Con, of course, with this pandemic? They knock on your door, knock, knock, knock. Hey, Jill, this is all over. Everything is fine. Get out. Do whatever the fuck you want. What would be the first thing you could do?
Hug people.
Okay.
Touch people. My love language is physical touch. Well, I'm kind of all of the love languages, but my major one is physical touch. And I never realized how much, the pandemic really, okay, first of all, the pandemic really hasn't changed much of my daily life, except my stress level.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked at home all the time. I made my own kind of everything. Had my own little universe here. But at the end of the day was when I could go out and do my exercises or my classes and have my human contact. I do Spartan races and I do longsword and Bowie knife training and kettlebells and all this kind of stuff. So the one place that I go and do this, I would see all of my friends and other people that work there. And I guess I hugged every single person there all the time, because now that I haven't been able to do that, I didn't realize how much of just my general well-being came from the physical contact and from my friends, like even, bumping up next to someone, rubbing their shoulder, or like if someone else is having a bad day, you give them a hug.
Yeah.
And I don't give like that Catholic handshake, peace be with you type of hug where it's like, I give like I give you a long hug to give you good energy, and I can't do that. So
you don't have that. We have a saying in Spain, that if somebody gives you the hand like this instead of a firm handshake, automatically you cannot trust that person.
Yeah.
If they give you the hand like this, it's like, nah, you know what? That's creepy. I don't like it.
it feels very gross and
Yeah,
insincere. And I think you don't.
It's like they're touching you with that. You know what? Yeah, you're disgusting, but I'm going to touch you like to look like I like you. Like, no, don't touch me. Don't touch me.
Yeah,
Don't
it's like I feel like they you're not really wishing me peace.
Yes.
You're not wishing me any peace at all. Like it should be with peace be with you and also with you and all that. I mean, if you want to, if you're now, I think maybe this will never happen again. But if you were in that situation and you had to do the handshake, or I mean, I've even hugged people in the church when stuff like that had to happen. But if you need to do the fist bump or this, the elbow, or just like the thumbs up, give me a sign that you actually care about me instead of you're limp, sweaty, like, oh my God, I don't want to touch you, or that handshake that it's barely touching you, and I'm like, oh, if I touch them, I'm gonna crush their fingers right now.
Yeah, the limb hand that you're like, should I touch it or not? Is it gonna break? Does he have some illness, and that's why he's like with his hand like this, like a small turtle? Like, yeah.
Give me the thing handshake, and by that I mean from the Addams family. I want like strong, a hand that actually has a personality and will do stuff, and like flip you off, but like, give me the peace sign if it's a good peace sign, or not this one, not the British flip off. But
Yes, it's funny because I was talking to John Bogdanov a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me how much he loves us Spaniards, how huggy we are, etc.
Yes.
It's like he was afraid, oh, maybe this is going to change your culture. This is going to make you, like keeping the distances more. And I was like, no, you don't know us. Like, what do you mean? Like, when this is over, it's not that we're going to hug people again. It's that we're going to jump on them and give them the biggest huggy bear, teddy grizzly bear hug you can imagine.
No,
this is going to just make us miss it so much. When we can do it, it's going to be more. It's going to be a lot more.
No, we're just going to have sex with everybody we meet when we first see them. It's like, oh, hi, friends of mine that are, like, oh, here, all of you, hey, let's hug each other. Oh my God, you feel so good. This is so great. I don't mean to be so sexual with everybody. However, it's, my skin is hungry. I've actually I've joked about, I have a lot of, I don't know, most comic book artists I know have some kind of shoulder, arm, wrist problem from drawing. And I have a regular massage therapist that I go to keep myself all aligned and in good working order. And I haven't been able to have anybody fix me since January.
Wow.
So I've even joked around. I texted them and said, do you think if I covered myself completely, like wrap myself in saran wrap, plastic wrap, and I put a fishbowl over my head, would that work? Do you think we could do that? And you would have to wear one of those dog cone things on your head, but facing up. And then we put a sheet over me too. I mean, I don't know. I was just trying to think of what's a way that this could happen.
Yeah.
Because I'm not diving into that scenario.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend, she needed a massage and all that. And she was like, I don't know how to do it. And I was like, just, buy a fucking astronaut suit, and you just put on the full astronaut suit, and you go with the astronaut suit. That's the only way they're not going to touch you. It's like, I'm not doing that like that. I'm sorry. That's where we are right now.
Yeah, I haven't even, I'm thinking about just taking this and cutting it because my hair is getting pretty long, and
your hair looks amazing. Don't
forget. Well, right now, just like at the convention, my hair will be wet until 12 o'clock, and then it'll be dry. But the first people at the table always get to see me with, I thought my hair would be dry by now, hair.
Let me see what people is telling you. That mug, Carolina loves your mug, and of course she does, because that mug is amazing. La Berenjena Atómica, hello everybody. Hi Jill and David, big fan of Jill, by the way, as you should. Everybody should be a big fan of Jill. It's just, the way things work. You have, the Bible says the 10 Commandments. My Bible says, be a fan of Jill. That's how it works.
I like
La Berenjena Atómica, can Jill talk a bit about her work on Sandman and her professional relationship with Neil Gaiman, please?
Okay. My work on Sandman. Ask this person specifically, what do you want to know? Do you want to know how was it to work with Neil Gaiman? Because a lot of times people ask that question. And thankfully right now you've got the Audible Sandman where Neil is narrating.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the narration that he's using is art direction.
Mm-hmm.
When you get a script from Neil, it sounds like exactly what you're hearing him read.
Mm-hmm.
and so it's very soothing and very ideal. It's like he writes in a storybook style manner where it gives you all the information, but not like a list of how everything should exactly be. He creates an environment in your head and then trusts that you're going to come up with something that matches what he sees. And there was one time when I was working on Sandman, when I sent him the page, like I would, back in the day, I would fax him small Xerox copies of my pencil pages because I liked his feedback, and we used to chat on the phone all the time. So I would send him something depending on where he was. And one time he did send me back a message that said, "This is exactly what I saw in my head." And that I feel is pretty amazing, because if you give everyone the same paragraph and ask them to draw it, technically they all will be drawing what the requirements on that page would be, but they're all going to be somewhat different. They might be in a different angle. There's certainly going to be in a different art style, but the artist brings their own interpretation of that. And if you want something to look exactly like a room you've been in, then you send a photograph of that room or a reference of that, because it's important that this chair is the chair that's in there, or this car. But sometimes you give an idea like, oh, this guy, he has one of those zoomy midlife crisis style cars where it's, you know, low to the ground and red and maybe a convertible. And then the artist gets to pick. But sometimes other people want, you know, this has to be a 1966 red Mustang with a white stripe up the middle, and a convertible top, which would be black, you know, and you're like, okay, then I have to look for that reference. But Neil usually doesn't give any type of super specific suggestion like that. And that was really, really lovely. It was the easiest collaborative working relationship I've had, which kind of spoiled me for the ones that were less collaborative, because not everybody is like that, and not that everybody is that chatty either, that wants to have, you know, conversation back and forth. They'll send work and they want it, you know, once you get it, you do what you want with it. If you have questions, you know, figure them out yourself. And I always love drawing Sandman and all the characters. I do not get tired of them. I can say I probably could draw Delirium, Death, and Dream with my eyes closed and get a pretty good approximation of what they might look like. Because when, you know, usually that is one of the most requested sketches I get at conventions.
Yeah, in fact, let me see, who was it? Felipe Gonzalez says, "Hi, a pleasure have you here. Many thanks for the Delirium drawing you did for me at Heroes Comic Con Madrid for my nieces."
I'm so happy that they like it.
We'll get to your questions later, guys. Let me chat with you for a while. Be quiet.
First, David, this would probably be very distracting for me. How do I find it live stream so I could see? I'm on the page on my iPad over off camera.
The link that is the link I put online yesterday, the one you shared.
Oh, all right.
That's where we are live now.
Okay, let me see if I can find that. That's interesting. La, 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 la. But I can keep talking and I'll try.
Yeah,
most of the time I will not do things properly.
Now, you were talking about the collaboration. You've worked with several writers, and also, of course, you do your own stuff from beginning to end. In many ways, and I've been talking about this with editors, writers, and artists. I feel that comics, there was a time when somebody decided that collaboration wasn't as important as having the writer's voice to be the predominant voice in comics. And I felt that was literally something that was really bad for comics, because comics live out of the synergy between both, the writing and the art.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you feel about the connection as a sole writer and artist for your own stuff, and sometimes somebody who's collaborated as an artist with somebody else's script?
I like when the art meshes up with the writing. It's a very good where it's a very good it's a very good match. And then I also think it's incredibly important for the writer to understand that I think a lot of people outside of comics don't understand that the writer doesn't just write the word balloons, that they also write the art direction.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that they come up with everything that's in there. They have to, like a film script, let people know what you have to see. Even when I was writing and illustrating my series of books for HarperCollins called Magic Trixie, when I was writing for my editor, I forgot that the editor really wasn't a comic person. And then I also forgot that they were book people. So when I was just writing art direction, slapped off really quickly so she would know what I was going to draw and then have the dialogue, they sent the entire script to proofreaders who copy edited it for spelling and grammar and punctuation, and it was marked up like crazy. And I had to go back with my own notes and say, only the parts where she's speaking are going to see print. Everything else that you see here is just going to be, I just told you what was happening on the page. You'll see that when I draw it. You don't need to see that, and it doesn't need to be, in a very complete sentence right now. The other things in the dialogue are dialect. So some of these things are misspelled on purpose because it's a little kid saying them. Like, how little kids would say, instead of spaghetti, they'll say buschetti or something like that. And I would spell it phonetically because I wanted you to be able to make that sound when you read for your character. So in the same way, sometimes you'll get a writer in comics or someone who I guess should be writing a novel because they are not cognizant or they don't care how much dialogue is being placed on the page. Yes. And how much space it's going to take up. And that lettering is also a super important part of the comic page. It's not just something, just because there's a font that, and a lot of comic book, you can learn how to do all the lettering on the computer, which I still have yet to learn. I understand in theory how it's done. I just haven't followed through on it. But there's a certain shape that word balloons have to be to look pleasing to the eye. Yeah. That the size of the lettering is important. Where it's placed on the page stops the eye of the reader from flowing. And the artist has created, if you're a good artist, you've created a flow how you want the eye to work around the page. And so there's not only a composition that happens in every panel, but there's a way that they connect together, and then a way that your eye flows in Western comics from left to right, top to bottom, in Japanese comics from right to left, Eastern comics from right to left. And it's there's a reason we do it for pacing. There's a way you want your reader to respond to the art that they see there. So to me, I make this analogy all the time, and it's because I like to cook. The art on the page of a comic is the best cake you've ever had. And it's the cake straight out of the oven, still a little bit warm. Someone starts to cut into it because, oh my gosh, it's tender and wonderful and flavorful, and you eat the cake, and someone stops you and goes, wait, don't eat that cake yet. And you're like, why? But this is the most perfect thing ever. It's like, there's more. And you're like, what could make this even better? And then they take a thin layer of icing and put it on top. Not that big, thick birthday cake end when you were a little kid that had the big buttercream flour, because you think that's good, but when you eat it, then you get sick to your stomach. Yes. By the time you finish eating it, that's too much frosting. And then it's not that tiny little glaze on there, or a powdered sugar that's drizzled on top of the cake. It's like, that might be good for a brownie or something, or a tart, but that's not enough. So you need just like the perfect amount of words equals the perfect amount of icing on the cake. So you should be able to understand what's happening on the page without reading the word balloons. And the word balloons will enhance what you see,
Mhm.
either based on the emotion that's happening in it or how you read it, or the type of sound that the writer wants you to hear in their head, whether it's the way that they write a dialect or the way the word balloon is shaped, so you can understand that someone is responding, maybe coldly or very robotically. You can make your word balloon shaped like that. The letter size can be different for whispering. But I think sometimes writers feel like their characters need to be talking to show their personality versus that the artist will show the personality, and that it can be edited down to a small bit of dialogue
Mhm.
to enhance it. It's not a film, so you don't get that luxury, right? And it's not a book where you have to describe everything in detail, even though the picture is there.
Yeah, an image is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah. So you really need to, yeah. So like if the image is already worth 1,000 words, you just need 10 more.
Yeah. That's why I explained, a couple times when I was asked about the couple scripts I wrote for DC. I was explaining I have two scripts. One is the lettering script, and another one is the script for the artist. Like, why do you use the lettering script? Because with that, I can get on my computer and I can put the balloons. It's not going to be the real balloons, but I'm going to see the space. I'm going to leave the artist. Like, why? Because I want the artist to tell the story, not my balloons. If my balloons take too much space, I am taking space from what is, this is a visual medium. Visual medium means we got to depend on the art to tell the story.
And now, like, I had to learn how to write a script because I started out just writing, just working as a penciler, then a penciler and inker, then doing all the other art. And my brain would only think of pictures. There's nothing wrong with drawing out the action that you want and then describing it either in a small sentence afterwards, or you can go the Mike Baron route. One of my favorite projects I've ever worked on was, despite the very scary subject matter of mental illness and child abuse that was in it, was The Badger, Shattered Mirror by Mike Baron. The Badger was one of my favorite comics growing up. And Mike writes a script. It's technically, he has a piece of loose leaf notebook paper, and he would draw a grid out with stick figures or like really crude drawings of the characters doing stuff. And then he'd write the dialogue like a word balloon with a little arrow going to the other guy. And he would always say, when he first started working with you, pay no attention to my crappy drawings and crappy layouts. This is how I see everything going. You can add a panel, you can combine panels if you need to, but this is what happens on the page and this is what they're saying. And I find personally, for me as an artist, it may not work the same for everyone. When I read the dialogue of certain characters, it helps me make my choices for how they act. So I don't necessarily need to see precise details about how this character is responding in the area, or definitely the stuff they have to do. I can tell if they're annoyed, that I can make them do things that are kind of like what I would do when I'm annoyed, or if I'm nervous or something like that. When I work with Evan Dorkin on Beast of Burden, I got so much more stuff that I created based on what he had the character say. And that was really excellent. So,
but then we get to the part about, you were talking about the complexity, and many people has been telling me about, when they talk to artists that don't do comics, and they always go back and like, wow, what you do is really difficult, because people that tends to underestimate, how complex, how difficult it is to do comics, especially for artists who don't do it. But also, as you just said, it's so layering. And I mean, first you have your pencils, then you go to the inks, but then the moment you add the colors completely change the mood. You are going to change the mood through the colors. Then you get to the lettering, as you said. The lettering is going to establish, again, the mood, give another kind of emotion. And then you have the thing about, I always say the same. If you don't agree, just send me to hell. Comics is the only thing that can defy Einstein theory of relativity. because you guys manipulate time from the first corner of the first panel and space to the last one. You can tell a story happening during 20 pages on the same second, or move around, or as Alan and Dave did in Watchmen, constantly depending on the angle. I would say the same example. Silk Spectre, issue 1, background, she's there. It looks like it's nothing. Issue 5, you see from her point of view, she's crying. You see what's happening on the other side. So they just move you in time, and you just realize, shit, that's why I agree with Adam Hughes. He always said, Watchmen, and I agree in a certain extent about Sandman too. It's like an onion,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It has so many layers, and you read it again, you find another one. You read it again, you find another one. And comics, I think, is the only art where you guys can just say, I am a manipulative son of a bitch, and I'm going to take you where I want, when I want, in every single moment, just depending on the shape I give this panel, the time I want to use it, and where I want to locate it. I can do it in every page, in every panel. You cannot do that in any other art, right?
I feel that the comic book art has a connection with the reader and an involvement and a participation with the reader that other mediums don't necessarily have. I mean, yes, when you're reading a book, you're using your imagination to visualize the things that the writer has described to you. And when you're watching television or a movie or a million series, you do have an emotional reaction to what's happening, but that's a bit more passive. You're sitting, things are coming at you, you're watching them, and you are appreciating when they do a swerve or they do time change or whatever. But comics, the space in between the panel, or the way that you arrange something, it definitely requires the reader to put certain things together to understand that. And you as an artist have to, or a creator, I say artist just in the general sense, because the writer is also doing this. If you're collaborating with someone else and they're thinking of how and why they want this to happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you have to figure out, well, first you have to read it and interpret it, and then figure out how to explain what it is that they explain to you, and make it, come to life. I think when you say manipulating time, there have been there's a lot of comics that have actually affected my heart rate as I'm reading them.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is The Sculptor by Scott Mccloud.
Yes.
The end of it, the way that I feel like he almost speeds up actual time for me in that. And I wish I had been hooked up to a heart rate monitor the first time that I read it, because I often, I just gave it to a friend of mine and I said, you have to read this because I need to know if your heart rate changes when you're reading this. Also, there was, and I'm going to butcher this name, there was a manga that Dark Horse was putting out, that I think it was Dark Horse, maybe not, but it was called the Kawasagi Corpse Delivery Service. I forget the name of the person or the agency. And it was these college students that were kind of these paranormal investigators, but they ended up, they're all different. Like one of them actually had a ghostly possession that was happening to them. And it must have, I have a bunch of volumes of it, so I can't figure out which volume it's in right now, but I use it when I'm describing storytelling stuff to students that I have. And the whole thing, the pacing gets you anxious and nervous because a scary and dreadful thing might be happening as they're putting it together, you're putting it together, and you see something happening further away. And it all leads up to a moment where there's one character that steps onto a train tracks. And then you turn the page and it's a double page spread and the character's in the middle and there's speed lines going one way and speed lines going another way. And I swear to God, I felt like a train go by me because the way they had paced it up until the page turned. And that's the other thing about comics that's pretty amazing, is the turn of the page is an important element to how a story is told. You
Yeah.
can turn a page and it's a second that's passed. It can be a millennia that's passed. It can be just enough microsecond of a moment to make an emotional thing happen when you have a reveal, whether it's just the next tiny panel on the top of the page, or a whole page, or double page spread, or something that folds out to be this gigantic thing. It's a really important part of our storytelling, and I don't know how to unless you become accustomed to it. I don't know how to I couldn't explain it if I had to try and explain it to other people in a book about how it actually means something. The same way that something like the in between of a panel gutter, like the gutter in between the panels, actually is a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
It's not a definite amount of time, but it's the time that the reader makes the assumption of something happening. Or it's the equivalent of, like in an old film, it's always deadly to me too. It's like you see a woman and off panel, there's maybe a guy coming at her or whatever. And you see these, like a shadow creep over her and she's like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If it's 1930s, she's doing one of these, because putting your hands near your neck or like clutching your pearls was always, you knew that she was in really bad danger if that was happening. And then you'll see a shadow happen, or it'll go black or cut away.
Yeah,
then your brain
that's Nosferatu. You just described the scene in
okay.
Nosferatu. The scene, you have the shadow of Nosferatu and the woman. Yes.
But when the thing, I don't know. I think some of that happened on camera. But when they instituted more of restrictions, is when filmmakers had to become more creative in figuring out how to show something that they probably weren't going to show really in a gross way anyway. But they would be showing some kind of a death, when things have consequences. So what they had to do is they would have to build up to a moment that for me, the reader, I prefer to have a comic that only had, I should always be building up to or moving away from an event on a page.
Mm-hmm.
If you have too much of, if it's a horror comic and it's like gore, 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 when something really intense happens, how is it going to mean anything more? Unless you're trying to make a statement about life is horrible and there's
that's also what happens with the gore movies. It's all all the time. So when you're supposed to be affected by something, you're like, you've been slashing people the whole movie. Why should I care?
Yeah, I'm not a gore porn type of person. Like Saw, I thought was a great movie until the end. And then or Hostel or any of that kind of like torture porn.
Yeah, okay.
Not my thing.
Carolina says the title is The Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service.
Kurosagi. Okay, I'm sure we hang up after this and I will not remember it again. I'll butcher it. I have to write it down.
Have you ever?
Very good series.
Yep. Have you ever read Naoki Urasawa? I mean, Monster or 20th Century Boys?
Monster, I have. I'm working my way through it.
Mm-hmm. Because you were talking about pacing and how to making your heart rate. I think Urasawa is the master. He completely controls pace in a way to create intensity and thrillers. Every time I read Monster or 21st Century Boys, I'm all the time like this. He's completely under control. I think he's the best guy in terms of composition in comics right now.
Personally, I'm a fan of I love silent moments, and I like the story the story to tell, to be told through the art.
Mm-hmm.
Not just because I'm an artist, but because I feel like it gives the dialogue more impact. I enjoy that in film too. You can have a lot of things that happen where you don't have to hear anything. No one has to keep talking about what they're doing or talking over something. They don't have to Tarantino the hell out of it with a lot of snappy dialogue happening all the time. That stuff is great, but you can have I think about basically just because I saw that trailer for the Japanese version of Unforgiven made me think about Unforgiven. It's one of my favorite films,
Mhm.
and it's certainly one of my favorite Clint Eastwood films because like if you take it as a standalone movie, or you also or you add it to his Man with No Name series as like how this character ages, because I think that's what Clint Eastwood is doing based on him aging as a man. Some of my favorite films he's done has been like my God, watch Mule. Mule is an amazing film. But he's taking, stock of himself and masculinity and frailty and aging, and also just his penchant for not being a guy that likes to talk very much about whatever it is. But in Unforgiven, he doesn't really speak very much in that movie at all. Everyone else speaks around him. He's a catalyst for things that happen. And then when he does start to speak, you are scared.
Yes.
And you go, oh my God. And that's the whole point of it. And I think like that's him pacing it up to that point. And in comics, we get to do that, whether it's a superhero comic or an autobiographical comic or a humor comic. Like everything should be done for a reason, in my estimation. Like that's how I like to do stuff.
No, that's absolutely right. You have a certain amount of pages to tell a certain story, so it should all count. And by the end of the day, why are you going to tell? I always remember one thing, and I think that was Walter Simonson, which surprised me, but somebody showed it to me like 3 months ago, which is the panel Thor wielding his hammer, and the caption says Thor is wielding his hammer.
Yes.
And I always use that as an example. This is not what you should do in comics, because comics, they should be complementary. The caption and the art. If they say the same, this is not comics. We're not using the language as we should.
I agree wholeheartedly. And then I will always say there are exceptions to every rule, because when you said Thor's wielding his hammer, probably because I'm working on Norse gods for Dark Horse, I can hear Neil Gaiman reading Thor is wielding his hammer. And it means that it's supposed to be ironic in a way where it's showing that he's being like the most macho. He's got his hammer going, and it's all some kind of testosterone fueled idiocy or whatever. And it can be used for effect. I have done it myself. Wonder Woman: The True Amazon, I often narrated in captions the same thing that I was showing a few times throughout that, because I was trying to create an omnipotent fairy tale style storyteller. Yeah. And every once in a while, I wanted there to be the same, to have a soothing effect of you hearing a tale, even though you were seeing the same thing happen in the panel. Because I felt like it complemented what I was trying to make there. But on a regular basis, I tend to not use captions in my work. It's more like I will use them as a device, like because I grew up with Stan Lee style captions. I won't, like I would probably encapsulate like what you may have not seen before, or I would like to make you think that there were other issues that hadn't happened before, or I would say, and then pop over and do something, or show the location. I'm not one to necessarily do a story on top of a story, which I consider like a very 1990s Vertigo style at the time. When it first started happening, it was something that had usually not been seen. And that might bring us full circle to your writer question about, people tend to emphasize the writer over the artist. And I feel like there are a lot of really, really good writers that write some amazing work, but I have to like the art to be able to read them. If the art doesn't grab me, I have a very difficult time forcing myself to read what might be the most brilliant piece of comic writing out there. Yeah, because it's all together for me.
I don't remember.
I have an easier time getting into a book.
Mm-hmm.
And that being said, I still haven't made my way through Jonathan or Mr. Norrell, whatever that Jonathan Norrell and Mr. Strange or whatever, because I can't get into it. Everyone's like, it's hard to get into. And they're right. I've like tried 5 times and I haven't been able to get it.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember who it was. I maybe it was Frank who said a long time ago, you know, a bad script can be saved by really good art, but a really good script, if you have really bad art, you just can't save it.
I don't know. Put my teacher hat right on right now. I see a lot of comics that are trying to prove you wrong. If you are my student, you will be hit over the head a million times with, where are they? I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell what they're doing. I need backgrounds here.
Yes.
Always need a background. Give me
Yep.
something. Yes, you draw this character beautifully, but if I can't tell where they are, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God they've been posting, because I'll grab it and use it every single time. They've been posting behind the scenes at Marvel movies nowadays, where it's like, Chris Hemsworth standing in a green room with some green boxes and a green thing on the green stick, because here's the thing he's supposed to be fighting. And then there's the box that'll be the rock he's standing on. And then the green screen in the background is whatever the computer artists are going to make up of Asgard or God knows what. And I say, this is what your comic looks like without backgrounds. And then this is what your comic looks like, with them. And it'll either be showing what the final product of that would be. Everyone's seen the final product. Or I'll throw out some black sod or something and say, you're creating a world. Don't get into, like, if you want to just make pinups and sit in Artist Alley and draw like cute manga versions of Harley Quinn or something, just do that. Don't say you're a comic book artist, because you're not a comic book artist. Comic book artist makes a story and they make a world, and it's like working for an animation studio. Like, if you look at the books of the art of whatever film it is, they send all the animators out. Like if it's Pixar or whatever, like when they did Brave, I love in that book they had all of these animators went to Scotland, and then all they did was just come up with books of inspiration, and then they would all of them make different Meritas, and then they, as a group committee, decided which one they liked the best. So it's like, when you make your own comic, you have to make your own Bible for it. Like if you're creating a city where everyone's going to hang out. I have a student, a former student, her name is Jamie Primack, and she does a comic called Binary Star, and you should all read it, because she grows leaps and bounds with every page she draws. And I still like to comment on her Instagram when I see her creating some incredibly difficult perspective with a lot of characters in it, but she's making it's like space goths is the whole kind of theme. And she went from hating drawing any backgrounds to starting to draw super crazy complex things with beautiful human characters and made up aliens and sexy characters, all this kind of stuff. And every time she does that, it brings it more to life. She's not just creating a comic, she's creating a world. That's what I urge everyone who wants to draw comics. You have to know where they are. You have to make it comfortable. You have to make it spooky. If you're making someplace, or it's like you can't just say they go into the spooky forest and just draw a couple of trees. You have to make it look like you don't want to be there by yourself.
Yeah, you have to realize that sometimes using blacks is going to give you that spooky feeling, and sometimes is how much cramped you do things. Instead of doing 2 trees, as you said, you can have 15 trees that make it, like you have just this small space to walk between the trees, and you are like scared because
you can make
anything.
You can make panels.
The panels, what we said before about the panel shapes.
So it's like they kind of have to move. You can tell them like that they have to move through something or make things really small. You have to when you design a page, you get to you're the set designer and the costume designer and the lighting. I don't know what that is, the gaffer, best boy, whatever. You get to create everything. It is a hard job, and like you said before, there's not another medium like it. Also, because so much of the heavy lifting, in film is sent out to a bunch of different teams, and it's this giant collaboration. But when you're making a comic, you're doing all of that for no budget whatsoever. Okay, I was like, and no payback. But you have a lot of responsibility, and you have a lot of opportunity to create something that will resonate with your reader on an emotional level, whether it's, that's usually one of my goals. Like, my goal is to make people feel something when they read whatever it is that I do. And it might be a moment of reflection, or it might be just like a silly joke to lighten their day, or it might be something uncomfortable. And when I was working on Beast of Burden, there was a time when I made myself sob laying out a page that Evan, some dialogue Evan had written. I didn't feel like we'd had enough room to show what they needed. We only had a limited amount of pages, so I called my editor at the time and asked him, could I please have more pages? And he said, I'll see if we can eliminate the letters page for this issue. He goes, how much will you need? And I said, this is so important. It's not a 9-panel page. It's a 3-page sequence that happens. And while I was drawing it, I was sobbing, like that kind of like snot coming out your nose, clear snot coming out your nose and a lump in your throat, like wiping away tears. And I ended up crying on the page as I was painting it. And I was like, I hope when people read this, they have this type of reaction, because I'm just making it up.
Yeah.
And it should be well paced, and you'll have the dialogue in there when everyone else sees it. So I'm hoping that it moves them.
That should be the point of an artist. I mean, of a storyteller in this case. You're a storyteller. I'm guessing you started doing comics because you wanted to tell stories, but it's also transmit your emotions to the other side, to say, this is my emotion, readers. I want you to feel and understand the emotions I want you to, to get from me, right?
That's interesting. That's an interesting question. Because now I think about it, people have asked how I started drawing comics, and I've always wanted to do them. But to say why I've wanted to do them.
No, my question is never how, because the how is the question that everybody does. I want to know the why behind it.
I know, but why? Like, now I'm thinking about it. It's like, because I've wanted to do this since I was like 5 years old. And I started wanting to draw, just draw cartoons, and I wanted to draw Snoopy. I liked Peanuts. And my mom told me that the reason I get to draw, or the reason I get to see Snoopy, is because somebody already draws him. If I wanted to do a comic, I would just have to make one up myself. I don't think she was pushing me to become a cartoonist.
Yeah.
She was just explaining to me why this was in the newspaper, or why there were those little books that were all these compilations of Peanuts cartoons, or why I could see Peanuts on, like, Snoopy at Christmas time. So I did that, and then I ended up moving on to liking Archie comics, and then I went from Archie comics to superhero comics. So, but I'm trying, I didn't ever sit down and say, I want to become a storyteller. But if I think about it, most of the time when I was drawing up, when I was making my own, when I made my own Archie comics, I took all of the kids in the neighborhood that I had played with, and I grew them up to be teenagers. And I took all of their personalities. There was this one girl on the block. She was a very little girl, and she would chase my brother around to try and kiss him. And she would go, my lovable husband, my lovable husband. And she would sometimes tackle him and kiss his face. And he was like, oh, yuck, yuck. And then I was always standing back because I didn't have, I felt very shy and not comfortable with my body or myself. So even in my character, when I grew in the comic, the way I drew myself and I was not the main character in any of the stories. You know, you'd think that I would have made myself, you know, to be the Veronica or at least the Sabrina, because in my stories, but I wasn't. It was everybody. I was telling the stories of everybody else, and I was kind of the sensible one in the background that just kind of saw things happen and commented on things. And then when I moved into liking superhero comics, I just happened to be a curly-haired 13-year-old girl who lived outside of Chicago, just like Kitty Pryde. And there I had a mutant that looked just like me when I first found X-Men comics. I mean, and before that I had found Spider-Man, and I wanted to be Spider-Man too. So it was not a gender-based thing, but it was very interesting that there was a character in Chicago. And then I didn't feel comfortable with myself, and I felt shy and chubby and weird and like a weirdo because I liked all of these comics and Dungeons and Dragons and swords and all this kind of stuff. I didn't feel like I fit in, and I was waiting for Professor Xavier to come and take me away to his school for gifted youngsters so I could too be a mutant. But I think a little bit of my life was always in my comics as they went along. And then I started discovering just like what the medium could do. And I discovered the Hernandez brothers. And I mean, for my money, Jaime Hernandez is like the best living novelist of the last century and this century at this point.
I agree. I keep talking about Jaime Hernandez, and I love both Beto and Jaime, but I keep talking to people about pound by pound. I always say, if you want to find pound by pound the best artist in comics, just look at Jaime Hernandez.
Because, well, I feel like he's always inspiring to me. His characters are aging, you know, as he aged, but the way that he creates new chapters in their lives and looks back, and then he deals with emotional stuff, and the way he manipulates time is incredible.
Yeah.
In his story, and also how he's so precise and succinct with his line. And one of the best things I got was that big Jaime Hernandez art book that's, you know, prints things out right like 11 by 17 size, and you can look at the thing and it's like, there's no sketching pencils on here. The same way Eduardo Risso, other like the best cartoonist, comic book creator ever, no sketchy lines. It's straight from the head through the pencil and out. And it's just like, it's finished in the inks, but there's no hesitation in there. And I don't know.
Yeah, just like Jordi Burnett. Jordi Burnett is the same thing. You know, Jordi Burnett's like da.
Yep.
And you're like, okay.
There are some things I can do like that, but when maybe there's a sketchbook filled with him trying to figure out which way to lay out a page, and then once he lays it out, it comes out perfectly. But sometimes I can't make what I see in my head come out on the paper, right? Even every single thing that I've made has been an approximation. I've only a couple of times been able to get it out exactly, a few times. And I like everything that I finish, and I do, and I'm glad that other people like it. But sometimes I'm like, I wish that I could just transfer everything that's in my head right onto the page.
But why?
Because I feel like I'm deficient as an artist because I can't make that happen.
No, why did you decide to make comics? I mean, like the question I had before, but why? Why? Because you needed you have the urge, as you said, since you were a child, to tell stories about others, about people, about life, about whatever. You have that urge, you know, like, I need to tell stories.
Well,
you're hating me right now. I know.
I'm very tied to what I do. Other people say, what do you do for a living? I can't separate what I do for a living from myself.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I wanted to get to. That's what
Yeah.
I wanted to get to.
Now, I mean, I'm so ingrained in comics, and I've grown up reading them and learning their language and knowing how things goes. Everything I read that's prose, whether it's a newspaper article or a BuzzFeed article, or whatever that pops up, I break it down into panels and how I would paste that story. Obviously, I'm a long-winded person. I feel like I found a language that speaks to me, and I found a community of people that understand me. When I went to art school, I found a lot of other people that were like me, so I no longer felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then I felt like I blossomed into a person who is not afraid to stand on a stage and talk to 1,000 people without any notes at all. And I like to control the worlds that I create. So it's one place I have control completely, even when the world is burning down outside. I have found it to be very difficult to produce art the way other people have during this pandemic. And my art has saved me during other crises in my life where that was the only thing I could focus on, because I knew if I sit down at this table for X amount of hours, I have this one thing. But now it's kind of been the opposite, where I can't focus really, really well. And it takes me longer. There's another reason I wear these guys now too. So it's like I have contact lenses in, and then I have my cheater glasses, but sometimes I'm not nearsighted enough to see the detail. So I have to take my contact lenses out, and this is going to be weird. This is why it's difficult for me to work at conventions anymore and because I have to be completely blind, but with my face this close to the paper to see exactly where the point of my brush goes to do the detail. So late at night, let's see, can you see this room? In my room, out these windows, my neighbors across the way with my light on will see me. It looks like I'm praying, or I'm doing some kind of mantra down near my paper, because I like 2:00 in the morning, my lights are on, and that's when I'm like, whoop, time. Or that's when my eyes will finally get tired from doing that. And then, but so I'll do a lot of I can do all the drawing, I can do all the field painting, but if I have to be really precise and make sure that eyeball goes exactly where it's supposed to, then I can't do that. Even at when I was last in Spain, and I would have some commissions, and it was painted. I could finish them up to a certain point, and I would say, "Come back tomorrow." Not because I didn't think I would be able to get it done really during the show. Sometimes I can, depending on if I had other panels or something like that. But I would have to go back to my room to make sure before I went to bed I could take out my contact lens and do all the detail.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing now. So it does slow me down as far as my process. I've been experimenting with some other ways to try and get that done. Haven't really worked yet so far.
That's what I was going to ask. If you have tried to go digital to do that.
I try to go digital. I'm slowly learning some things. It's faster for me to paint on paper. I don't understand all of the tools and brush manipulations that have to happen in Procreate and Clip Studio or other things. I've got all of them, and I do dabble because sometimes I'll post them. When I do have some time to mess around with it, I'll post them. But I really need a live tutor, because I have a lot of questions that could be better answered if someone just told me how to do the thing I need, instead of me trying to find out.
Are you friends with James Jean? You are friends with James Jean?
Oh, no, I don't know. I mean, I don't know him personally.
Because he's a master on on coloring, on painting with the iPad.
Most of my students are amazing with the iPad, and they need help with their structural drawing. But then when they take it to Procreate and render it, I wouldn't think it's the same drawing a lot of times. And I'm just looking to learn how to do flat color. You know,
Yeah.
I want like flat color I can add on to. I'm a very slow learner when it comes to that kind of thing. Also, I wish I had the time that I could just dedicate to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's not easy for me, I don't make much progress. And the whole time I'm at it, I'm thinking of, I should have been painting right now.
Yes.
I should have been drawing comics right now. So I'm happy right now to teach myself a little bit of stuff. I take notes every time I learn it, and I've got a stack of notes on this is how you do this one thing, this is how you do this other thing, and refer back to them when I'm trying to draw.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't really found brushes that I like, and the pencil doesn't do what I want it to do. Like, there's too many variables in the digital pencil where if it was just me drawing, it's just, I know it's years of me knowing how to draw.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm just, if I turn my wrist this way, I can make this happen. I turn the paper, I make this happen. And they say, oh, you can do that on the iPad too.
Yeah,
And
the Apple Pencil. The Apple Pencil, you can do it.
Well, I have the iPencil, but the thing is that I know that it's programmed into the program or the pencil to respond a certain way when it gets to a certain angle or there's a certain pressure on it. It makes something happen. That's not always the thing that happens if I was doing it with a regular pencil on paper. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to me really dragging my feet to learn digitally. It's not that I'm against it. It's that I'm really slow at learning this kind of stuff. And I need a very patient person that will sit next to me and answer my questions so I can get acclimated enough
Yes.
to start wanting to mess around with it. Like right now, if someone could explain to me, like when you tap on a brush, all of those adjustment things come up. They all have weird names. I don't know what they mean. I wouldn't know why I would adjust them because I don't know anything about it. And no one ever mentions on a Procreate tutorial, because I follow them on Instagram and I have found their little tutorials to be very informative. But it's like, tell me what this gadget does and why would I care? And why do I have to adjust this? Why don't you just make a new brush that does the thing that I needed to do?
Well, I'm pretty sure somebody on the chat will give information about that because they mostly use the Apple Pencil. But yeah, you can program it. You know, you can change it. You can change the brushes. There's a lot of things you can do. But yeah, it takes some time for people to explain. Another funny part, you know what it is? They've created something that is called Paper-like.
I have a Paper-like over my eye.
You have the Paper-like, which is amazing. I was the first time I was with it, I was like, wait, it really feels like paper. You know,
it
it's
feels
I don't
better.
know.
Oh my gosh, that was one of my problems. Was it was too slippery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like the Apple Pencil because it works like a pencil. There's no delay, but then it was like everything is too slippery. So then I did get the Paper-like, and I like that. I like it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It does help.
It does. Well, you know, somebody.
I also like to see. Here's my other problem with, like, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, or what I was talking about earlier, is about how you paste things on the page.
Yes.
I like to see things in the size that they're meant to be.
Yes.
My brain is really used to seeing things 11 by 17 size or 10 by 15 size. So I know I can pinch it back, but that makes it smaller. And then they said, oh, well, you can zoom in. And what I've found is when I've been illustrating something that I really like, I did an illustration or a pen and ink illustration for Gerard Way for like quarantine coloring book.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I found a brush I like. I'm doing Scary Godmother and Bugaboo, and it's outside and there's a tree and there'll be all sorts of things for people to color. And then when I pinched back, I realized that the size of the pen or the brush was too thin. It looked great when I had zoomed it in so I could do it. But then when I went back to the regular size, it was like, oh, I'm going to have to do this all over because the brush is not thick enough. And it's because I was zoomed in too far.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like because you can zoom in really far, sometimes you might be too precious with everything and not deal with your depth of field anymore, which is also a very important design issue that people need to discuss.
Two things. One, you just reminded me, John Bogdanov 2 weeks ago. He was telling me, yeah, for a while, he was showing me his light table and all that. Like, for a while, I moved to digital. Then I stopped, and I was like, what happened? Like, well, you know, I started, since you can zoom in so much, I was just, being precious, as you said, being a lot of detail to everything. A small figure, I could stay 3 hours, just go and go and go. And then I got the comic, the physical comic back. And I was like, shit, that figure is like this. Nobody's going to see it. And I spent 3 hours in every figure because I could just zoom in. And like, that's why I stopped and I came back to paper, because I realized the 11 by 17, I knew how much detail I had to use in everything, that this needs that much detail, this needs this small detail. But in digital, he got lost.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is I think right now the storytelling is transitioning. And that's not a bad thing. It's like, I'm familiar with the old language and I want to learn the new language, and that's fine, because there are so many different ways that people read their stories nowadays. There's those excellent 4-page comics that always, they're kind of the Generation Z style reaction to the world on fire kind of a thing. They're kind of crudely drawn, but they tell a story and they make sense.
Yeah.
And they're perfect for reading on a digital format. And then there are other people that are creating things that happen one kind of square panel at a time that you're meant to see. But I'm used to a book format.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm happy to design things in all of those formats. I just want to know, because if I'm doing a comic, I'll still do it in 11 by 17, knowing it's going to get down to a certain size and that'll be best seen on a tablet. But don't break it up and put it panel to panel so someone can read it on their phone. Because first of all, I'm always wanting you to see the entire page.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then sometimes there's a sequence of panels that's happening where you're supposed to see them in a certain order to get a sense of time or to get an emotion out of them. And if they get broken up so you can see them like a film strip, or like one at a time.
I hate the guided view. I hate it. That's not. I'm sorry. That's not comics. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, it's not. It's a form of storytelling, and if you tell me that that's how it's going to happen, then that's how I will plan.
Yeah, exactly.
My story for you, or my story for it. And I think there's room for all of those.
Absolutely.
It's just, right now everything's happening in so many different ways. There are people who are only telling their stories in webcomics, or there are people who are telling their story one panel at a time on Instagram. And then there are people who are still doing things meant for publication at a size that comics have always been. So personally, that's my go-to. So that's how I'm comfortable telling a story. I will adapt to other things, but it's like I'm designing the page that way. I am doing composition to make sure your eye flows a certain way, and that's how I want to see it. And then I'm hoping you'll have a tactile page turn. And I guess it kind of works when you swipe, because there's a little bit.
Not the same. Not the same. The feeling of turning the page by yourself at your own pace. Of I want to go faster because what's going to happen, or I need to go slower because I want to absorb the emotion. That's not happening in when you use comicsology. It's not the same thing. To flip on your own pace than to just blah blah blah.
There's a language to that too, and there'll be like, your daughter is young, and if that's how she's used to now reading comics, that's how she's going to have her association of passage of time, or the pacing, or whatever, and that's perfectly, right.
Absolutely.
Every generation has a way that they read something. I just think because I love telling stories in all forms, I think there's a good way to kind of mix all of those together.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is that what some people does, I know Mccloud and other artists do, is they have the iPad where they draw in one side, and then there's something called Sidecar, which is that you have your iMac. You have your iMac, and your iMac, you can see the page in full size while you're working on the iPad, so you can see both things at the same time. That's amazing.
Wow, that also sounds distracting.
Well,
It sounds amazing and distracting. It's like, wow. And where do they look? Well, and what do they watch their Netflix on while they do that?
No, but I think it's amazing to see, the panel you're doing on the iPad, and at the same time on the screen of the iMac, you can see the whole page. So
Yeah,
you
that will help.
you can always, think this is the size this is going to have here, but this is going to actually going to look. And also you can do at any time, you can just click and say, okay, this is how 11 by 17, click. So now I can see how it's going to look in the actual comic on comic size.
Wow. Oh, that's super helpful.
Yeah, I think, just saying, just giving you ideas. Okay, let's go back.
Another gadget or another, well, my poor computer. I'm not computer savvy, so anything that has to be fixed or updated or added to it or hooked up, there's always a glitch for me when it does. Like one
No, I think Sidecar is automatic. Just you have an iMac and the iPad. Like both updated to the last operating system, whatever. It just connects by Bluetooth and it happens. You don't have to do anything else.
All right, I'll look that up when we sign off. Are there more questions?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. That we are going back to people because I don't want them to feel ignored. Okay, Felipe Gonzalez asks, how did you remember your beginnings in the industry?
Does he want to know how I started in comics?
Yeah, I think so. Your first works in the industry and all that, yeah.
Oh, well, I started working while I was a teenager for some very tiny comic book companies locally in Chicago. There was one called Just Imagine Comics and Stories, and it was a retailer that was also publishing an indie comic, and I used to work for them as far as selling comics at convention. Every weekend we would load up the van, go to a state that was close to Illinois, so it's Wisconsin and Iowa and Ohio, Indiana, any place you could drive to in 8 to 10 hours. And then, so they'd pick me up after school, load up the van, we'd go eat some food, drive to whatever convention, sleep in the van, load up the next morning, do the convention the weekend, and then drive home with enough time for me to get to school on Monday. And while we were doing that, mostly I would help them set up, and they would let me run around Artist Alley and meet artists and watch them draw. And I would also draw while I was with them. And they ended up they were going to have to go to press, and they had like a 6-page gap in the page count that they needed. So we made up a silly superhero parody while we were at the convention, and I drew it while we were at the convention, and then I went around to Artist Alley and asked all sorts of famous comic artists to ink one panel of it. Technically that was like my first published work, and then I ended up doing some more stuff with them, and then I went to art school, and while I was in art school I took my portfolio over to First Comics, which was in Chicago at the time, and got a critique from their art director, and then eventually I ended up getting like a tiny backup from London's Bar Story. And then I ended up, once you have something published, you can use that to get published as your resume, because that means somebody took a chance on you. And then I ended up working for the very old Kamiko comics, and I worked on the Elementals. So I was still in art school when I started all of that. So I was juggling my art school stuff with comic book work that I was getting. So like 18, 19 years old. I think 19 when I started the Elementals or Fathom. And then by the time I was 20, I was doing that. And then I painted the Scarlet Letter for, and I did Corum actually while I was still like 19 or 20. So that's,
wow.
Once you have something published, then someone else, you can use that as your resume to show that you've been published and someone else should publish you.
Yeah. La Berenjena Atómica asks, That's the atomic aubergine for you. Could Jill talk about her create-her-own work on Scary Godmother? Is there any more Scary Godmother material in the works at the moment? That would be really amazing.
Uh, yes, there is more Scary Godmother in the works at the moment. I'm working on a book called The Scary Godmother's House, and I will be. Well, in the middle of the pandemic, I started a Patreon, and in May I had a surgery, so I didn't end up doing very much on my Patreon. But my plan is to post a page of that as I finish it. So it's definitely all Scary Godmother stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to have a good chunk of it done. Start looking for it in late August, because I want to be able to start posting pages of that all the way up to Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that, and hopefully I fingers crossed that the best of all worlds will happen, and we'll do more TV shows with Scary Godmother.
Cross fingers.
Yeah, I've been talking to my friend Zeke Norton, who was the director on the first two specials. We want to work together. We want to do some more stuff, so we're coming up with pitches.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to hit the ground running.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Next, Paula Bentimiglia. I love her Wonder Woman, the True Amazon. Would she like to keep working on with Diana in any other story? And second question: do you have any other comic character that you like that you've never worked with that you would like to tell a story of?
I'm assuming they mean a superhero character.
Yes.
Wow.
Or not. Any other character. It could be, I don't know, John Constantine. I'm just giving a silly example, but you know what I mean. Superhero or not. Any other character
Right. I understand. Well, I mean, my biggest desire right now, I love collaborating with people, but I really want to publish more of my own stories, and not all my stories are like Scary Godmother.
Mm-hmm.
I have a series in my head that I've been trying to write out so I can also get that published. At least the overview. I almost completely know how it ends, but not really. So that's the problem. And it's dark and serious, but also has spooky stuff in it because of me. So I would like to do that. I like collaborating with people. Sometimes I don't even know that there's something that I want to do until someone mentions something, and then we just start brainstorming about something, or I'd hear about a character and think, oh, I never thought about them before. Let me see. What characters I have to go I could go back to my 1980s X-Men. I would love to do a story of. I'm lucky. I feel like every once in a while I get to dabble with characters, play with them for a little bit, and then put them back the same way they were. I like to do things out of continuity because I just don't want to try and keep track of all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not fast enough anymore to work on a regular. The process that I do is not quick enough to work on a monthly book. Mm-hmm. So I would love to be able to do something X-Men-y. I'm super enjoying Daniel Kibblesmith's Loki, so I would love to work on that. I don't know. I would have to think about it. What I really enjoy is for fans when they ask me to draw something that I really usually don't draw, because it makes me think about that.
Yes.
I also like, New Gods, and I used to never like Jack Kirby's Fourth World stuff. When I was younger, I wasn't a fan of Jack Kirby, up until I must have been 16 years old. Even though, and I got to meet him too, but when I was 13, I didn't get it at all. And now I do, and I look at those characters and I look at what he created and how he created things, and I would like to draw some of that stuff because it was so interesting and weird. I know that's kind of a standard story. I like doing personal stories too. I mean, I like doing biographies, and someone says you should do an autobiography. I'm like, I don't know if I'd be able to do that, but I could probably. But I would. That's not to say that a lot of personal things have already shown up in my work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Throughout, I'll add stuff that has either happened to me, or I mean, in Scary Godmother, there's a lot of stuff like that. But then also in the Invisibles, I put where applicable, like there through a lot of like drug-induced scenes, I put stuff that I've experienced in there. Weird things that like fit into someone having, a lot of hallucinations. It's like, well, how will they know that it's not stuff that is meaningful and that happened?
Yeah.
Let's see. Like, I really like things that I've liked working on. I really liked doing the one Swamp Thing story that I did with Mark Millar. So I got to draw Swamp Thing. I got to draw something spooky. I, pencil and ink that. I feel like I don't need to do a whole series of them.
Yeah.
I would like to do just a bunch of one-offs.
I was gonna mention, believe it or not, before you said Fourth World, I was gonna say I would like to see you doing a story with Silver Surfer, Galactus, and the Eternals.
Ooh, I would like to do that too. I always liked Doctor Strange too.
Oh,
that
yes.
was another character way back. Like even when I was a teenager, I was like, I want to do Doctor Strange. And one of the very first times I went to New York, I went to go try and find. I went to go try and find his house on Bleecker Street. I was like, it has to be here. And
I did the same thing the first time I was in New York, and I even post under the the street, the name of the street, Bleecker Street. There, yeah. I did the same thing. Trying to figure it out.
I was looking for that window, with that crazy, like swoopy work on it. I wanted it to be there.
We have it: Silver Surfer, Galactus, Doctor Strange, and the Eternals.
Yeah, well, I mean, right now isn't Thor the Herald of Galactus?
What?
Isn't Thor the Herald of Galactus right now?
No, I don't think so.
I thought I read that somewhere.
But doesn't matter. Out of continuity, you do your own story, whatever.
Oh, he's so shiny though. That's a lot of action.
No, now I don't know if he's back to shiny, but for a while he was black.
Oh.
So I don't know but anyway, out of continuity, if Mobius could do it, and Stan Lee, whatever, they could tell the story whatever way they wanted, you can do it too. Why not? You're Bill Thompson.
What I'd really like to do right now is I'd like to do an Avatar, The Last Airbender story.
Wow.
Just one story. I don't know, maybe like.
Didn't Dark Horse have the right for that?
I don't know.
I think so, yeah.
Because, I mean, I have some sketched out that I haven't painted yet. But, oh my God, that was a perfect cartoon.
Mm-hmm. And the first question by Paula, we didn't answer was if you would like to go back to Wonder Woman to do another book with Diana, or you just told the story you wanted to tell and that's it.
I told the story I wanted to tell, and I would probably be fine with doing other stories. I just don't have one right now. It's weird. A lot of my best story ideas come completely by accident.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I sit down and say, today I'm going to write a Wonder Woman graphic novel, because that's not how that happened.
Yeah.
That happened by me being asked consistently when I first worked on Wonder Woman, well, this must be a dream come true for you as a woman to work on Wonder Woman. I'll bet when you were a little girl, these are all the comics you read. And I didn't read Wonder Woman comics when I was a girl. Mm-hmm. I read Spider-Man and, X-Men. I was mostly a Marvel girl at the time. And Wonder Woman, I felt like at the time I was seeing her, I felt she was too boring because she was perfect. And there was no conflict there. And I didn't get the larger feminism aspect that like she came from. That's not to say I didn't twirl around in my house like to change into my Linda Carter Wonder Woman because I watched that show and, you know, wanted to be Wonder Woman, but I had seen other superheroes that I identified with more. Phoenix, Storm, you know, like I wanted to be a powerful telekinetic. It was like, or Julie Newmar's Catwoman was also another. It's like, that's what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be her in that costume, and she's much better than Batman or everybody. So Wonder Woman wasn't really something that I had dreamt of working on. I really liked working on it, and I love the character, but she wasn't a lifelong dream for me. And then people asked me like, why? And I said, well, she was too perfect. It made her boring to me. Yeah. And I said, well, what was she perfect? And then I started thinking about what would happen if a magical, like super powered baby was born onto an island with a hierarchy of royalty on completely of women where there are no other children. And I know what a doting auntie I like to be. And, you know, I don't have the responsibility of a parent, but I can certainly spoil nieces when I want to. And here, if you have a princess that is like a miracle baby, and a bunch of women just like, you either serve her or you're just delighted by the fact that there's a child on you end up with a kind of one of those fairy tale princes that have to go off and learn how the other half lives. And so I just kind of decided that she had to learn how to be Wonder Woman. I wanted it to be more like a fairy tale because she was a magical creature, and you know, she was created, you know, and there was Greek gods, and I love the Greek mythology. So I thought, well, I want it to be more of a fable, and I want it to be more of an operatic tragedy. That's the other thing that I like, you know, I felt like her story was really operatic, but there was all comedy with no tragedy. So it was just me trying to fix something that wasn't broken to begin with, because I watched the movie and went, well, I guess I was completely wrong about my thought that she was too perfect, because here's a perfect woman, that perfect thing for noble reasons, and I am thoroughly engaged. I don't feel there's a problem with it anywhere. And I cried several times in that movie. So, but I like what I made, and I think it's very, very good. I like the statement that I was making, and I like my character of Diana, and I like the opera that I made.
Okay, yeah, and also Paula asks, I would also know I would also like to know what she considers her influences and the artists she admires.
I have many, many influences. My comic book influences back in the day, John Byrne, P. Craig Russell, Steve Rude. Steve Rude introduced me to Andrew Loomis. So Andrew Loomis is an illustrator from the 1940s who also pretty much founded the art school I went to, which is the American Academy of Art. Charles Schultz was a big influence on me. Dan DeCarlo, so all of the Betty and Veronica or anything he did. But Harry Lucy was another Archie artist. So a lot of Archie artists, Bob Montana and Bob Bowling. So they're all like, I got 4 or 5 Archie artists that were very influential on how I think about everything. And then when I moved off into comics, John Buscema, Wendy Pini was very influential on me, because when I discovered ElfQuest, you know, and then there were Japanese artists that I had seen, like Rumiko Takahashi, and gosh, lots of manga artists once I discovered manga. And sometimes manga being discovered was being at a Japanese or an Asian food mart where they just had a pile of random manga, and to be able to buy a phone book of something that was this crazy style that you'd never seen, even though you couldn't read it. There are tons of artists that, like, I don't even know what comic I was reading, but I was completely enthralled by the way that they told the story. Once I discovered Mobius, it was like, oh my God, what, you know, break my fingers. I'm happy to be influenced by people from around the world, and every time I see someone whose art I admire, they influence me in one way or another.
Was it more or less when Frank and you discovered Japanese comics? Was it more or less at the same time? Because I think that both of you more or less discovered at the same time, and boom, got really influenced by it.
I didn't know Frank at the time, but
Yeah.
when he discovered Japanese comics, you could tell. But I think the way that we responded to them was different. I mean, I remember when I first saw Akira. Akira is much more American than girls manga or shoujo manga is, where it's more of montage, where all of the way things are rendered have a meaning to them, and there's imagery that goes in there that's meant to elicit an emotional reaction, but not beat you over the head with it. It's like if you've grown up reading this, you know how you feel when you read something, and you're influenced by the way that they have added certain characteristics to the way they tell a story, not how the panels are laid out. And now in shonen manga, I don't want to sound like I'm certainly not an expert, and I ain't Jill-splaining to you. I'm just telling you what I have gleaned from reading things over the time, is that the structure looks more like American comics with, or at least in that story. And then I discovered Miyazaki, and then, was elevated to yet another level of, oh my God. So I just try and incorporate, how it inspires me. I don't know if I'm copying anything, but I'm seeing how other people have expanded storytelling in a way that I wasn't aware of before.
Yeah.
And I try and do that. I'm influenced most of my regular influence, my artistic influences come from riding my bicycle and seeing light hit something a certain way. And I know it evokes something in me, and I want to try and capture that.
Yeah, reality.
Or while I'm doing something else. But I'm very visually oriented, obviously like an artist, but about minutia a lot, and color. I break down, I do this even when I make food, right? People are like, why do you bother to plate your food? I'm one of the people that takes a picture of their food and I put it on Instagram, because
me too. Don't worry, you know I do it too. So
things should be appetizing, right? When you eat them, it's like, to me, food is another art, and the way that you plate it is your canvas, and the way that you make the light hits things. There's a certain time of day when, people that photograph things for advertisements know, like if you were doing a car commercial, the golden hour was like 13 minutes in between sundown and sunset, where you can wet down a pavement and it'll reflect a certain way, and every cool detail on that car will show up but you have to have it parked the right direction, and the car has to be standing, and if you lose it, you've lost the golden hour, right?
Yeah.
So everything I see, I think about it in those terms. The same way if I'm reading instructions for something, or I'm reading someone's letter to me, I'm breaking it down how I would tell this biographical story. When I see something, I'm seeing, do I want to paint this? Does it work in something that I want to do? Or, I better take a picture of that. I have 68,000 photos on my phone, not an exaggeration. And people are like, why don't you offload that? I was like, because usually I'm going back to try and find something because I need to draw it. It's like, where did I put the thing that I saw that would make good columns? Or where did I find that beach at sunset?
I remember that was then I will come back to what I just said about Japanese comics and influences, because it reminded me of something. But I remember when we were in Sweden, I think Sweden or Netherlands, I'm not sure, that you kept taking photos of the sky at a certain time of the day.
Yep, that would have been. Yeah.
And was it in Sweden? I think
it was in Sweden. We were
in Sweden when we were looking at the bus that could take you to Valhalla. Remember that? And we were with the crows eating, the crows
Yes.
jumping on the. We were, just so you know, we were in Gothenburg, and we had to go have lunch, to a whatever, a food
It was
truck.
a little hot dog shack.
Yeah, how to share. And the crows didn't give a shit, and they just jumped on a table and they tried to eat the stuff. And then we saw a bus that literally, I think it was to Valhalla or something like
Yes.
that. And we
I'm
just
gonna
look,
find that picture now.
yeah, and we just look at the sky, and I remember you were like, "Oh my god!" And then you started taking pictures at a certain time of the sky in Gothenburg because it was just something, really, really peculiar, really different.
I do that everywhere. I mean, and thankfully, I am. This does remind me I have to thank the gods and thank you. Just like every time I've been able to go to a different country for a convention or a different city, the fact that I haven't been able to go anywhere this entire year is very painful for me. And I think back last year in May, we were in Sweden,
Yeah.
and then I had other things. I had the trips planned to other conventions. It was supposed to be in Brazil this May, but it wasn't able to go. And I'm so happy that I took the opportunity, and that comics and comic book fans and just the love for the medium has made it possible for me to go to places like Spain, like Italy, like Russia, like Sweden, Norway. I've been there too, because of comics.
Yeah.
That's while we might not always speak the same language, and that's usually the American not being able to speak anything everybody else speaks, because everyone else is speaking English. That's fine. But one language that we definitely all speak is comics.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's our storytelling language, and we have these shared fables now. Even if it's something that you don't know, that someone can turn you on to, and you're like, oh my gosh, I get this, I love this, because we all love this type of storytelling.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to mention before was, it's so fascinating to see how we all discovered, more or less, I think, in the United States and in Spain, at least in Spain, manga at the same time. Of course, first with Akira, but then we discovered Ranma. A funny story. When we met each other, there was something called the IRC, was like the original internet channels, and
Okay.
Paloma had two nicknames. One was Gun, which is the original, Alita nickname. The Alita, Battle Angel Alita. The name in Japanese is Gun, and then she got Rogue because her love was manga and the X-Men. And I remember, yeah, both things at the same time. She loved manga and the X-Men. And how is Japanese comics affected? Because of course Frank was really influenced by Lone Wolf and Cub, and all that kind of thing. A lot of other people, as you know, was influenced by Akira, but a lot of other creators, and not only females, were really, really influenced by shoujo. And you can see it in the storytelling, how they portray the emotions from then on.
Yes, and there are people who grew up with translated manga here in the U.S. and probably everywhere else being their first comic reading experience.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
Their language is going to be a little different than the language of comics that I learned, based on the way that their characters react or respond to things. Sometimes it's incredibly cartoonish or with like a big mouth and like little lines over their face, and that means something because that's how they grew up understanding of frustration or exasperation or sexual attraction or rage or whatever. But I mean, I feel it doesn't take much more than a couple readings to learn that language.
Absolutely. And that takes us to what you just said before. My daughter, 6 years old, is sick, gets used to read on the iPad. That's her way. But that happened also with manga. As you just said, many people started reading manga, so for them this is the natural language of comics. This is it's fascinating. Okay, let's go back to people. We are not ignoring you guys. No, I'm just kidding. It says, Taylor says, Neil is 100% talent. What a pleasure to see your art, Jill, especially when you ink and color yourself.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know how to do it any other way, actually. I haven't gone back and just done a pencil and an ink illustration in a very, very long time. And I think it would be very hard. I've had people ask me for a sketch of that. They're like, oh, it'll be just quicker. It's just going to be pen and ink, or just do a rendered pencil drawing for me. And I'm not used to that. So it actually takes me longer.
Yeah, because it's like asking you to cut a limb. I mean, for you, the finished piece, it's like Daniel Acuna, for example, one of the artists I work with. For him, a finished piece has the color because he thinks in color already. He thinks of the nuances. So they're telling you cut a limb, because if you lose a part of it, which is the color in this case, for you, we will never be a finished piece, right?
That's not true. One of the stories that I want to tell will be all black and white, but it'll be watercolor. I would love to get more graphic as far as just with stark black and white, like more Mike Mignola style, just to be able to be more confident in my shadows. I feel like sometimes I let color, I'm not as effective as I want to be in color. Maybe because I'm not using a limited palette, or I don't have enough value drawing underneath it. And my things are bright and cartoony when maybe I would prefer them to be dark and cartoony. And but I feel like my style is not evolving completely, but it has to look a certain way to be finished. And sometimes when I deviate from that to try and either make something go quicker or try and to take it to a different level, it doesn't look right. And then I can't, it just doesn't feel like something I would want anybody else to see. And therefore I abandon it. So I'll have to see what I can do to get myself out of my comfort zone and do some more things, because it would probably benefit me. I would like to be able to do more different types of styles. There are a lot of styles I can do, but I've been doing this one for so long that it's hard to shift gears. I think that's it. It's not that I can't do it.
You're looking to challenge yourself, trying to do something more expressionistic in a way, right?
Yeah, and I know I can do it. It's just that people say, oh, well, when was the last time you just penciled and inked something? It was like over 10 years ago. So it's like, it's just something I don't think about. And I used to do that every day, and it was a very easy way to approach stuff. I should probably get back to doing some of it again, just because I feel very rusty.
Berenjena Atomica says, Beasts of Burden was amazing. Thank you. What else? Kurosaji. Yes, Berenjena Atomica says, Urasawa is incredible. That's the artist I mentioned before. We talk about him. Carolina Bensler asks, how do you deal with art blocks, blank page fears? As an artist with so many Eisners, have you ever suffered from imposter syndrome?
Well, first of all, I think everyone ends up getting a creative block. A blank page of anything, whether it's a blinking cursor on your computer screen or a blank page in your Procreate or just a big piece of paper, it can be intimidating. But that, I feel, is because you expect what's on there to be perfect every time. And instead, I try to approach it from make the thing. It's better to make something than to make nothing. And it might not be perfect. Craig Russell does. Oh, I'm probably gonna. This might be outing him as far as his technique. I don't think so. He says that when he starts a project, he'll start with one of the middle pages, because you have to, like, you get on a roll, right? Like every project, it doesn't matter how good you are. When you're first finding your voice of that project or that page, and it's not like you're changing art styles or anything. It's that you have this brand new thing in front of you with a blank piece of paper in front of you. He does the first couple pages in the middle. That's where he gets his legs, like finds his groove, and then jumps to the first page. So you don't have a lackluster first panel.
I understand.
Right. And it's not like anything Craig Russell does would ever be lackluster.
No.
But as far as his standard goes, he wants it to be in the middle of that heightened roll, which I personally do too. That makes a lot of sense. So I find, like, sometimes if I sketch out little drawings and do little character studies before I hit the ground running on something, then that's where I accomplish what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I Imposter Syndrome, I just mentioned all of those other artists, and every day there's somebody popping up on Instagram that is not only creating something beautiful to post every single day, they're somehow managing to keep their big cartel store open and make products and do tutorials online. And I'm like, I can't get anything done right now. But this, of course, I'm like, well, maybe I should just forget about it and just start baking all the time, because that's the thing I seem to do better right now than drawing. So yeah, I often suffer from, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome, because I like where I am and I feel like I'm supposed to be here. But sometimes I do feel like not as good as. So I feel a little inadequate, but I know I'm not.
Yes.
And if you say, that person mentioned I have Eisner's. So I think, thankfully, other people have liked my work enough to believe I deserve some kind of a recognition for it. I don't create anything I do to get an award. I create what I do to get a reaction. And an Eisner is a certain type of reaction, right?
Absolutely.
Also, here's the other thing. When I was going to art school, I met all of my friends who were like me. When I was in grade school or high school, I didn't have the Archie Comics high school that I thought I was going to have, where everything was going to be a Betty and Veronica lifestyle and be all good. It wasn't terrible, but I wasn't a popular kid. I wasn't, an athlete. I wasn't all of these certain things. I was the artist, which was an okay thing, but there was a much better artist in my school. In my grade school, I might have been the only artist, but when I got to high school, there was Amy Schreiber, who could literally paint like Michelangelo. And one winter, she sculpted a full-size horse out of snow in her front yard. It looked like a marble sculpture. And I could barely make a snowman. So suddenly I had a bar that I had to try and achieve. It was like, God, I have to be like, Amy knows how to do so many things. I want to be that good. So then I became more serious about looking at different types of medium instead of just drawing comic book with pen and ink. And then I went to art school. And when I went to art school, I found a bunch of people who not only liked art, but they felt like me, and we became fast friends. And then by then I already had found my voice, that I was working in comics. But the other thing that I did was I went to improv school, so improvisational comedy, at the Second City Training Center in Chicago and the Players Workshop of Chicago. And that taught me to not be afraid to do anything. Don't be afraid to fail, because there is no failure. There's just something that, it's a scene that didn't work right. And in comics, like if I'm going to draw something, you're never going to know if you can draw it unless you draw it. And if it gives you a problem, you're learning from it, right? So if it's not working out right, you're going to learn what will be right. And you're going to learn how to better master the thing you do. And so, again, it's you're supposed to look at that paper and go, yes, and. Because in improv, the most important person on stage with you is your partner. And if they're thinking that way and you're thinking that way, your scene's going to be great. In comics, I feel like the most important person is the comic. If the writer is trying to make the most important comic and I'm trying to make the most important comic, we're going to make a great comic. Or the story, right? Like the story is the main focus. It's not, is this guy going to get an award? Is this person going to get an award? I don't care. That's not why I'm doing it. I want someone to pick up that book and go, oh, this was the funniest, or, oh, I never thought about that before, or you made me look at science like an interesting thing. So your blank paper should be the worst thing that can happen is you think you'll suck at something, because at least you tried.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have a book full of not perfect drawings than an empty book and regret that I never tried to do
Right.
something.
Yeah. I just remember that Carolina asked the same question to Bill Sienkiewicz, and he just said she's an artist, right? And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah. How do you like? It takes one to know one. And 5 seconds later, she was like, yeah, but does he has blocks? And he's like, yeah, I just keep working.
Sometimes it's like the only person that's going to know it sucks is you.
Hmm.
Or that it didn't come out the way that you want to is you. If you have a really big problem, like you're saying, like, I can't draw human faces that they look like humans. Well, there are ways to practice that. But if this isn't coming out the way that I want it to in my head, it's still a cool thing, or it tells the story in a certain way, or it's of a style that might not be the popular style, then, you're the only person that's going to know that.
Jill, I am not seeing you.
Uh-oh. I got a prompt.
There you go. There you go. Perfect. Perfect.
I have to plug this in. Whoops. Sorry, this is the part where they should play music. Technical difficulties. Blah, blah.
I can ask Alexa to put on something.
No, there I come. I'm back.
Okay, good. Carolina says, that's a really cool advice. Thank you. Carolina, stop asking the same question to everybody. Just work.
I want to see. No, Carolina, follow me or tag me on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, show me the thing that you're drawing. Whatever it is.
Yeah, she's an amazing she does mostly, she did a couple things in comics, but she mostly does book illustrations, cover for books, for novels and all that. She's really good. She's really good. Carolina, you heard? Yes? Okay, good. Next one. Yes, La Berenjena Atómica. Could Jill talk a bit about her work on the Invisibles and how is it working with Grant Morrison, please?
Okay, I can say that I loved working on the Invisibles. It was much more difficult than working on Sandman. I learned a heck of a lot about a lot of things I never even heard of while I was working on the Invisibles. Grant was not as communicative as Neil was, even though both of them traveled around the world while I was working on their books. Like Neil was always traveling for like a signing or some kind of thing, and I would fax him a page and he would send me a page, or I would travel for something and I would work on it at an airport, because back in the day airplanes were big enough that I could work on a comic page in coach in the regular thing and not be crowded at all. So take that, airline industry, you used to have room. But Grant was always like doing something weird, like he was climbing a mountain in Nepal, or he was someplace doing a spiritual Invisibles like thing where there was no way to get in touch with him, and he would be inspired by something and it would show up in what he was writing. And if I had questions, we didn't have the internet the way that we do now. I would have to go look for stuff in a book about it. Like he would make some offhand mention about something. I read the book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, because he referenced all of that Grail bloodline stuff that Dan Brown ripped off totally, completely.
Absolutely.
To make the whatever that
Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, the Da Vinci Code. Because when that came out, I was like, oh, he must have read Holy Blood, Holy Grail, because that's what this is.
No, he ripped it off. He ripped it off. He literally ripped it off.
And he lost. I mean, the guys at Holy Blood, Holy Grail apparently lost their lawsuit against him, and I'm judging for them. He needs to give them money. Yeah. But anyway, I
yes.
Grant mentioned something in there that I had to draw a certain location that there were no pictures of at the time. So I'm reading this book, I'm flipping through it, looking for a reference to come on. It's like, come on, there's got to be a picture in this book. It's like, no, this book is like mostly prose. So I had to read the whole thing to kind of get an idea. And then I found a painting of something and another painting that was supposed to be in the thing. so I ended up having to do a lot more reference work on that. But I found working with Grant to be super fun. I started to feel not so smart because it was always some stuff that was some very interesting scientific or metaphysical things that he was referencing, and I had some super fun adventures climbing mountains and doing psychedelic mushrooms on a mountain and manipulating matter with him in an Invisibles-like fashion, because it is what it is. And those were some good stories. That'd be a good autobiographical comic to draw. It was very funny. Here's one thing I didn't know. In the US, our cold medicine does not have codeine in it. So when I went from a convention in England up to Scotland to visit Grant, and I had caught a little bit of a cold, I didn't want to have, con crud while I was actually doing my first vacation that I'd ever planned on doing. I figured I would visit Scotland and we're going to do some stuff. So Grant said, well, he picked me up at the airport and said, well, let's go to the shops before we go back to my place. And then, we can talk about story and, hang out. And of course, it being Grant, there was a bottle of champagne. And but also it being me, there's a bottle of champagne. But I stopped at the chemist to get some cold tablets, thinking it was just like an antihistamine that would unstuff my nose. So I take this tablet, and then we're sitting in his house talking about stories and invisibles, and he's telling me about his travels and his girlfriend and all this kind of stuff. And we're having champagne because we're decadent. And I wake up on the floor like 4 hours later, 5 hours later, it's dark. And apparently in mid-sentence, I passed out because I mixed codeine and alcohol, and just went down. He saw that I wasn't dead. And he left me there. And I woke up, and then in a strange house, wasn't sure where I was, and wandered around until I found him in his office writing, and his cats were there, Vinegar Tom and other stuff. And I was like, oh, what happened? He goes, you were telling a story and you just fell over. And we're like, all right. And then I was like, why? He goes, you probably had too much cold medicine. And I was like, well, I've never had that happen to me before. And so I read the ingredients, and I was like, oh, it's a major drug. So yeah, that's probably what happened to me. I guess I'll just be fine without cold medicine from now on. Or I'll do my cold medicine with some coffee instead of my cold medicine with some champagne. And so that was a fun story.
Oh, sorry. That's a good one. Whatever doesn't, everything has happened to you, Jill. Whatever.
I kind of like that. I was just talking, and it was like somebody shut off the on switch.
Yeah.
And I went out, but Grant just was like, well, I don't know. Maybe he felt my pulse. He was like, well, she's breathing. I'll leave her on the floor.
I'm actually not surprised, because he probably, with the mushrooms or whatever else, he's probably had that took himself 15 times,
No.
flop.
I would say when that business happened, it was an incredibly responsible situation. Well, I guess on the side of a mountain, maybe not. But it was, we're going to have a mind-altering experience now, because we're going to learn knowledge from the universe, and we're going to, gain all of this spiritual business. And it was that time. I believe that was also that time for him and his friend. But it was probably the most record album thing I've ever done in my life. Like sitting on top of a mountain with one dude wearing like a Percy Bysshe Shelley fluffy white blouse with some leather pants and little Jim Morrison glasses, and then Grant is like his leather coat and his stovepipe pants, and I think I had some kind of Stevie Nicks skirt on and platform shoes, which I do not recommend climbing up hiking, rocking area, to go sit in a field full of wildflowers, looking across the sea to Ireland, which you could see with binoculars.
Yeah.
Drinking champagne and eating stuff you found on the ground was probably not the wisest thing I've ever done, but it could be photographed as like some kind of psychedelic album cover.
Yeah, I can see that. Let's move on. Oscar Silence Death asks, what are your thoughts on the Birds of Prey movie?
Haven't seen it.
Good. Carolina said,
I don't always rush right out to see the comic book movies. I do see the Marvel ones straight away. Not all of them. I might have seen them now because quarantine, but the same way I don't buy every superhero comic that comes out, or I never bought there was one time when I was so into Marvel, I just felt like I had to buy everything. And then I realized that's kind of what they want you to do. And maybe I should just buy the ones where I liked the art and the story instead of everything. So comic book movie wise, I see what I want to see when I want to see it, not straight away all the time.
Yeah. Carolina adds, I ask the same question to all these great artists because I like to know what's inside their heads.
Probably the same thing.
Yeah. And Sarah Soler, also another great artist, says, oh my God, Grant seems to be a bit hardcore. Haha, not dead? Okay, I guess he's okay.
No, he's very sweet, very lovely, super fun, very funny. I had a great time visiting with Grant. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we learned it was a teaching moment. We both learned Americans don't know that European cold medicine has strong medicine in it. 2, if we have known that, we wouldn't have mixed narcotics, I guess. Like 2 things that could technically make you very sleepy. And he certainly couldn't lift me. That's true. Like if I was on the ground, if I think about it, there's no way he could heft me up. I'm heavier than he is. So, maybe now I know he's more muscular than he was back in the day, but I'm a big girl. I'm tall. I'm heavy. So I don't think I could lift anybody's dead weight off the floor. I might be able to drag them and make sure they were comfortable. So yeah, I don't think he did anything wrong by leaving me there. It was in front of a fireplace, and it was kind of got a gothic-y looking house. It was, the only way it could have been worse is if it was like that. It didn't go from being, now I'm in a cool friend situation to, oh, this is the beginning of a horror movie where Grant's gone. I'm in a house. I don't know where I am. There's a monster in it.
By the way, Paula Bentimiglia asked, "Where's Oberon?"
I know.
I heard the cat like 4 or 5 times already, but he's not showing up.
When I was eating my breakfast this morning, he popped up, turned his butt to me, and shook his tail in my face. And I expected that was how this entire interview was going to go. And he's sleeping somewhere, not bothering me at all. He's being a very good boy.
Good. By the way, we've been at this for more than 2 hours.
I know.
And you have a life to come back to. So just one last thing. What's next for you? In terms of comics, what is that goal? And in part, you said it with the thing about, going to black and white, going more expressionistic in a way. But what is your next goal in terms of something that you haven't done that you still would like to achieve in comics?
Well, I did mention I've got a couple of series in my head that I would like to do. And of course, it'd be something I would write and illustrate at the same time. And again, I am doing more Scary Godmother, but I would like to, I guess what I should do is take my own advice and just hit the ground running with those 2, not worry so much about the end, but worry about what I'd be doing right now. I usually don't recommend people, like, if you want to have a good story, you got to know how it's going to end.
Yes.
And you might mess with how you get to the ending, but you really should know where it's going to end up. And the fact that I can't figure out what I want to do between 2 possible ways to finish the story, I feel like I can't do it. So I should just probably shut up and do it, because it might work out for me.
Let me tell it to you this way, and then you continue. Remember, the important part is the journey, not the destination.
Right, that's true. But no, I mean, we've learned from so many TV shows that the destination is pretty important, because you'll either lose me or you'll be like, really? That's the end of that? But black screen? I have to figure out the ending? You're a cheater. Totally cheating.
I still love the Sopranos ending. I'm sorry.
I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad, but I found out that a lot of things peter out. And I would rather have a very definite what the hell ending, or wow, I didn't expect it to go there, or meh. But I don't want it to just kind of, lose gas, and like the balloon totally falls, or the car just stops and sputters because you've been driving it too long, or the characters, it's like they can't go any further. So
yes.
it can end with like, okay, I just don't know what happens, but I'd rather there was a good way to tell the story. So I would like to do that. I would like to do some, and it was a more scary godmother. I sometimes like to adapt things. What I would really like to come back and do is Will Pfeiffer and I did finals, and I would love to do another one of those set in the world right now.
Yeah.
Or what the world might be based on our world that we created. Because we have talked about that. Every time we talk on the phone or anytime we see each other, we do mention stuff that we thought we were being outrageous back in the day, and our world has far surpassed the type of things that we created. And I said, well, like what, like who would have thought that students have to go to school wearing bulletproof backpacks, or they have active shooter drills? That's a dystopian future we would have never thought of. Yeah. Even before when we first worked on finals, actually, and we had it done, and it was done for like 8 months before it came out. And in the time we had finished it, and then right before it came out, Columbine happened.
Yeah.
So the very first thing, and one of the first scenes in our comic was a psychology major. He was a sniper, and he was doing kind of like that Austin, Texas sniping that happened back in the early 70s, to see the type of we were dark, to see the type of psychological response that would be elicited. Then they would write their paper on it, because that was the type of school we had set up. But we tried to think of, at the time, what could be the worst horrible thing that you could think of in every aspect of how people were taking their studies. And we never expected that things like that would really ever happen. And that if they ever happened, people just wouldn't care about it so much. Yeah. So the amount of callousness that I see in the world is very uncomfortable to me. And so maybe Will and I were like, well, if there's any magic in these books at all, maybe we have to write like a utopian story instead of keep writing all of these dystopian things that build on the way the world is going. Maybe the energy we have to put out in the world is to create more like Scott McCloud's Zot, where it's the first part of Zot before it became the really hard look at the world Zot, and where it was a lot more good stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess nothing works without self-reflection.
Absolutely. By the way, you mentioned that next week, just so you know, Monday, somebody called Brian Azzarello. On Wednesday, and I have here on the show next week.
Oh, yeah?
Brian is on Monday, Scott McCloud is on Wednesday, and Grant Morrison is on Friday next week.
Oh, my God.
So that's all the names we've been talking about. This, like, he talked about Scott McCloud, he talked about Grant. Oh, okay, that's next week for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, like when you have Brian on, there's nobody better to learn how to write a perfect script from. Yeah. As far as, like, he trusts his artists like no other writer.
Yeah.
And the way he's able to write art direction is super succinct, but his dialogue gives you so much.
Yeah, Lee, I have Lee and Eduardo both here already, and they talk exactly in the same terms. Succinct when he has to be, but then all the dialogue tells you everything about the emotions and the nuances and everything you need. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like if you're looking to talk about like what a perfect collaboration is, where people finish their own sentences, is Eduardo and Brian.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that they started out with a language barrier, and not only overcame that, but I mean, I don't think it's hard to look at and read things that Brian writes with other people, because part of my brain always thinks about what would Eduardo do with this.
Yes.
But I just naturally see his work in the terms of Eduardo.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't read everything that he's written recently. Like I read some of American Monster, but I haven't read. And then I just read that sexy one that he wrote for is it Boom or whatever. I just saw some of that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
But that artist is really good too. I mean, I think that the girl that's illustrating that is kind of like Paul Pope and Milo Manara had a baby.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, that is a good mix. No, but
yeah.
as you said, as you can see, I love talking about process. The innards of comics. That's what motivates me. So this is what I am looking forward to with Brian. Just go deep in the process of writing, of creation and collaboration too. Yes.
Yeah. If I was gonna say, I know that I've taken up 2 hours of your time because I'm never a short interview, and but if you would like to do this again, I would like to somehow figure out how to hook this camera up to show you work.
Yeah, actually, I didn't want to. This is really easy to do here. I just didn't want to, ask for too much, because this is supposed to be two friends talking. But here,
the one thing I miss is being able to show people what I'm working on, like in person. I very much like to do that.
Absolutely.
And but right now, the thing that I'm working on, I don't know if I'm supposed to show it.
Uh-huh.
So that's why I haven't posted art of it in a while. But I would love to be able to show you the Scary Godmother stuff that I'm doing. So another time, like maybe in October.
Absolutely. We can do it again. This has a really cool feature. I will send you the George Pratt. George Pratt literally gave a masterclass here for nice. For like an hour.
There's a way to turn your screen around for things.
Yeah. You see in the bottom on the left, there's like a screen, a small screen. If you click, there is share your screen, and then you can just select the folder you want, and you can keep talking and show all the process while you're talking. No, this is a really cool thing that is for.
Wait, so everyone who's listening is like, why are they talking about how this works? So you mean that I can have photos of the things that I've worked on and show them, or
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You can, imagine that you have a folder on your computer, just ready and open, okay, with art, with process. So you go here on the program, bottom left, you click on share your screen.
Yeah.
Then after that, you just say, it just like you click, select the folder you want to show, and then you show it all.
All right, because right now I'm on my phone, so that's why I'm unclear.
The program.
I always do this on my
phone. The app on the phone, on the iMac, or the iPad. All of them have the same clickable thing, the share your screen thing, and you can just show whatever you want. So anytime we can do that, and you can solve the process. Of course, I know people is gonna love it.
All right, well that would be cool because I would like to do that, and let's let everybody go off and have their dinner for you or lunch for me, and whatever other time it happens to be. But yeah, I would like to take more questions from people. I really like to do that.
Yeah.
I would like to show some art.
See, people is aside of going crazy because I just mentioned Grant Morrison and I haven't announced him yet. They are answering about that you showing out. Yes, please. Yes, we'd love to see the work. Please, please, please. a lot of hearts and a lot of smiley faces with hearts.
Yay.
So I
Okay.
see it seems that they are gonna like to do that. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna have to remember to tune in for Grant,
Hmm.
or maybe I shouldn't. I should just like, because it would be interesting. I'm sure we remember me falling over in a completely different way. That's all I remember from it. I remember like talking with him and then waking up later. But,
I will try to remember to ask him to
yeah.
see.
Well, I mean, Grant and I have done a lot of weird magical things together. Like we did a magic spell over the phone to try and cure the tumor of the cat that I had, and it worked. And something else, I forget.
Too much stuff.
Yeah. But he's great. Like that's the thing I miss about San Diego Comic-Con is I haven't seen people in a really long time, and it's not like you run into people easily because everyone is scheduled and there's 75,000 people in one room. But when you do run into people, you get, it's so nice to be able to run up and hug them and find out what they're doing and see what's going on. And I know he's got lots and lots of things that are always happening to him.
Yeah.
So I hope he's doing excellent stuff.
Yeah, I that reminds me, the second day I did this was with Howard, with Shaking. And he was telling me, you know what? I don't miss the cons. What I miss is to just find the random people at the con or go together for dinner. And that person you didn't think you were going to see suddenly pops there and you start talking for 2 hours.
I do miss the dinners.
Yep.
I miss the dinners. I miss the fans. The hustle is super hard.
Yeah.
I don't miss that. I don't miss the setup and the constant selling. People would ask me you must have so much fun in San Diego. And I was like, I don't think, except for New York Comic-Con, I never work harder in a row, because you have all this prep you do beforehand. You're literally running around like crazy the weeks before the show to prep the things you have to either send or bring with you, what the weight limit on things is, who's going to receive stuff when you get it, once you get it, or if it gets delivered to the hotel, how will you then get it to the convention center, then how you're going to set it up. Then usually setting it up, you do the preview night, and it goes from that. And then the regular day will start out with, and I'm sure fans have this too, because when I wake up in the morning, I look out the window and people are lined up around the block, 3 people deep down the Esplanade and by the harbor. So they're just standing and they're doing their con planning. But then I'm planning to run in past them, set up my table. So if you're up at 7 a.m. to make sure you eat something and are in the show by 9 o'clock, and presentable in some way, and set everything up, and then you're like, oh, I didn't get that sketch done from the night before. Let me work on it now. Then people start coming up to you. You're working your booth and then you do panels until the thing closes, which is at 7. And then it takes so long to get out of there and then get back to your hotel to drop things off just so you can go eat something. And by the time you're done eating, you're like, and then you get back, or if you happen to socialize with people, which is very nice to do, you're like, oh, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And now I have to make sure I can get back to my hotel so I can, and I'm not even talking about being drunk or anything. It's just having a meal, walking somewhere, seeing people on the street, and then you go talk, or you go to a stand somewhere and have a drink, talk for a long time, and then go back to bed. And you do that for 5 days in a row. Yeah. And while you're drawing the whole day and talking the whole day and running to panels and then coming back and drawing and then thinking like, oh, if I get up an hour earlier, I'll be able to get that sketch done for that person. And it really runs you down. Yeah. So that's not the part I miss at all. I miss all the socializing. Actually, 3 years ago, when I won Eisner Awards, I posted on Facebook today from the Eisner ceremony, because I had 3 Eisners. I won 3 Eisners. It was fantastic. But that was the first year I hadn't set up. I flew in to go to the Eisners. I took a couple of meetings and I had a few panels, and I flew out Sunday morning. So for the first time ever in my history of going to the Comic-Con, I ate lunch every day. and then I wasn't exhausted the entire time, and I moved around and I saw people. It was weird not to have a table and to be responsible for anything. And then part of me was anxious because I'm like, I'm not making any money. I'm not I'm not supporting myself. But then I thought, this is how a writer goes to a convention.
Yep.
They fly in, they go to a meeting, they
do the panels.
they do a signing, they do a panel, they meet up for dinner, and they have an enjoyable con. And then sometimes I see people post pictures like, oh, we're sitting by this restaurant poolside having a meeting talking about the next project. And I'm like, I don't get to do that. I have 62 sketches I'm late on and I have to finish by Sunday morning. It's like, so that part I don't miss.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, let's you should go have lunch because you are not at Comic-Con. So
but I have to make my own lunch because we're in quarantine.
okay, yeah, but it's still better than having to rush around because you're in your table at Comic-Con and you cannot have lunch.
I will have the lunch. I wish we were having a lunch in Spain right now.
Oh yes, I so love that. I so love that. But we will have it. You know that. I will make it happen. Sooner or later, there will be a vaccine. We will get together. And if it's not in Spain, I will take you to other countries as soon as I can. So
hopefully they'll let an American in. I've been so well quarantined. I'm following all the protocols.
As you should, woman, as you should.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, to all of you, please, Jill, don't cut after I cut the live feed because I want to say proper goodbye to you. But to all of you, thank you so much. Jill, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. Goodbye to everybody. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see Oberon, who didn't show up here today, and see other things. I'm at the Jill Thompson, and that would be a good place to find me.
Yeah, and Carolina, remember what Jill told you about showing her your stuff on Instagram and all that. Okay.
That's right. And draw something today, even if you think it's up.
Yes. To all of you, thank you. Goodbye. Have a good weekend. Remember, wear your mask for everybody's safety. And on Monday, if nothing happens, because sometimes things happen, life happens, or with us, same time, Brian Azzarello. Have a good weekend. Going out on 3, 2,